Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and here are the top 10 dystopian books of all time. And if you disagree, I'm going to throw you in YouTube jail, take away your right to comment, and feed you nothing but dislikes. Either that, or this is just my opinion. Number 10, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Never Let Me Go follows Kathy and her friends at an elite boarding school in England. Initially, the book doesn't feel overtly dystopian, but there is an unsettling feeling about this school and plenty of mystery surrounding the truths about the outside world. This is a character-driven book, and the story focuses on the friendships and relationships that are formed and become strained throughout the lives of these characters. It's a slice-of-life book, but all the little moments are given significance by the realities of the greater world. The book is written with an atmosphere of impending sadness as it explores the effects of social conditioning on our relationship to love and mortality. The emotions this book conveyed to me felt akin to smiling while crying, or perhaps laughing while sad. I'm not sure which, but either way, there's definitely both beauty and darkness to be found here. Of the two Ishiguro books I've read, I slightly preferred Clara and the Sun, but I enjoyed both of them, and Never Let Me Go is the more dystopian of the two, so it's the one I picked to start this list. And just quickly, before we get to number 9, there can be a bit of overlap between the dystopian subgenre along with post-apocalyptic or cyberpunk books, so if one of your favorites isn't here, it might be coming up in a future video on one of those subgenres. Number 9, Player Piano by Kurt Vonnegut. Player Piano takes place in a future America where virtually all production is automated and human labor is almost obsolete. Vonnegut explores the practical implications this has on the workforce, but also the philosophical and existential questions it invokes. What is my purpose? What are humans for? I think this book is still relevant over 70 years after it was released, and it's scary to see Vonnegut's portrayal of how art and entertainment are mass-produced by algorithms. This was Vonnegut's debut novel, and while it might not be as tight and absurdly funny as his later work, it's still sharply satirical and prescient. By Vonnegut's own admission, he cheerfully ripped off the plot of Brave New World, whose plot had been cheerfully ripped off from Yevgeny Zamyatin's We. So while this might not be the most original Vonnegut novel, a young Vonnegut's take on a disturbingly dystopian future is still a worthy read. Number 8, Blindness by Jose Saramago. Blindness tells the story of a contagious white blindness, and in order to contain the epidemic, the government rounds up the afflicted blind people and quarantines them in internment camps. Inside, they are left to survive on their own without their sight. This is a high-concept story, and something that I thought was well executed was the exploration of every implication of this blindness. How would you react if you suddenly went blind? How would you perform certain activities? How would a community operate if everyone were to become blind? And Saramago never abandons this premise to then explore different ideas. The blindness remains central to everything that happens in the story. Saramago also uses a range of writing styles and formatting choices in order to convey this sense of blindness. For example, there are no chapter titles or numbers, and he doesn't use quotation marks for dialogue. He removes as many visual cues as he can in order to amplify this feeling of disorientation. Saramago won the Nobel Prize in Literature a few years after writing this book, and I did find it just a little bit amusing that somebody won the Nobel Prize for writing without quotation marks, and it wasn't Cormac McCarthy. I actually just read this book because of the recommendations in the comments on a recent video, and while I can't say it was a fun read, it was an impressive examination of harsh conditions and the human spirit. Number 7, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Brave New World takes place in a future world state where humans are genetically engineered, placed into a social hierarchy, and pacified with pharmaceuticals. This future society relies less on fear and violence to control its people, but rather manipulates them through entertainment, technology, and medicine. I read this book many years ago and remember thinking it was probably written in the 50s or 60s, only to come to find out it was actually published in 1932, which I think makes it all the more impressive that it's still a poignant and relevant read almost 100 years later. This is undeniably one of the most influential dystopian books of all time, but just in terms of my own personal reading enjoyment, I have it at number 7 just because I found some chapters more engaging than others. Earlier in the video, I mentioned a lighthearted quote from Kurt Vonnegut about Huxley being influenced by Yevgeny Zamyatin's We. Well, Huxley claimed that he actually didn't read that book until after he had written Brave New World, but it would seem that neither Vonnegut nor Huxley's friend George Orwell really believed him. I guess you'll just have to read both and check out the similarities for yourself. Which brings us to number 6, We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. We is set in a totalitarian society known as One State, and our main character, D503, lives in a glass-enclosed city comprised entirely of straight lines. And one day, D503 makes a shocking discovery, that he has a soul. The One State prioritizes mathematics and engineering, and values a rigid order in society which it enforces through surveillance. But what place is there in a world like this for individuality, creativity, or passion? This is a poetic and prophetic book, and one of the most influential books in the dystopian genre. I often hear the phrase the big three when it comes to the classic works of dystopian fiction, those being 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451. But I actually think this should be the big four, especially considering We was written first. And just before we get to our top 5, at the end of the video, I'll be spinning the quantum wheel in order to find out what my patrons have picked to read in the month of June. Number 5, The Children of Men by P.D. James. The Children of Men is set in a near future where humanity has become infertile, and a dictatorial regime attempts to control a civilization that is experiencing hopelessness. This book is apocalyptic in a way, but not with a singular cataclysmic event, but rather a gradual decline, which is harrowing in different ways. How would you behave if there was no future for you and your family, no future for humanity? And it raises some rather interesting philosophical and spiritual questions. What purpose does a human life serve if it's no longer part of an ongoing life cycle? This is a rather grim read, but I think there's perhaps a glimmer of hope to be found in the darkness. I very much enjoyed this book, as well as the film adaptation. If you have watched the film, just know that the book is rather different, both in terms of the story and the style. There's a lot less action. But if you are interested in a dystopian book with a philosophical approach, I think there's a lot to get out of it. Number 4, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Fahrenheit 451 depicts a future society in which books have been outlawed, and firemen exist not to put out fires, but to burn books. This is one of the most famous literary works on censorship, and I think another important element of the novel is the way in which society is systematically conditioned to be disinterested in reading in the first place. And it is the creation of this conditioning and lack of critical thinking that allows these practices to be perpetuated against the people. This book not only has a thematic weight to it, but the way it is written puts Ray Bradbury alongside some of the most talented and poetic writers in all of science fiction. If you're a bit of a prose snob, this might be the dystopian book for you. Number 3, A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. A Clockwork Orange follows a young gang leader and explores a subculture of drugs and ultra-violence. In this future society, when criminals are caught, they are exposed to a behavior modification therapy known as the Ludovico technique. The book is narrated by the sociopathic Alex, and being in the mind of this character is an uncomfortable place to be. He's intriguing and charismatic, but also disturbed and an abhorrent human being, which makes for a rather confronting reading experience. Alex also uses a slang called nadsat, which can be a little tricky to follow at first, but I think helps bring this world and subculture to life. The reason why this book has stayed with me for so long is the exploration of free will versus control. Is a person that's forced to be good actually good? And is this better than retaining the freedom to make bad choices? This book is dark, it's satirical, and it's intensely layered with questions to do with morality and manipulation. Number 2, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. The Handmaid's Tale takes place in a totalitarian society where human fertility is on the decline, and any women that are still fertile are forced to become handmaids. This book explores the desire for power and control, and how obtaining these things is often through corruption or the abuse of religion, and this can lead to war and violence, especially violence perpetrated against women. This book is told in a personal way, focusing on our main character, a handmaid named Offred. And at first I thought this was a little bit slow, focusing on the minutiae of her day-to-day experiences, but as we slowly learn a little bit more about the outside world and we flesh out this character, I became more and more invested in her story. And by the time we reached the end, we reached the climax, I remember actually feeling my heartbeat while reading those final few pages. And number 1, 1984 by George Orwell. 1984 takes place in a totalitarian superstate known as Oceania, and this is led by its dictator, Big Brother. This has to be one of the most dystopian of dystopian futures. You really feel the weight and the effects of the oppression, surveillance, manipulation, and propaganda. This is definitely one of the most influential dystopian books, both in terms of the ideas and the language. Phrases such as thought police or newspeak or doublethink are all in common use today and are known as Orwellian, a phrase that is used to describe things that are akin to events that happen in the book. All of the books on this list are important, but the reason why 1984 is my favorite is because I think it was firing on all cylinders when it came to the themes, the story, and the characters. I was so invested in the outcome of this book, and when it comes to endings, sometimes a book can feel like a kick in the gut, or a stab in the heart. Well, 1984 to me felt like a nuclear bomb to the soul. I recommend checking out all the books on this list, but if I could only choose one, it would be 1984. So there you go, those are my top 10 dystopian books of all time. Let me know your thoughts on these as well as some of your favorites in the comments. And just before we go, let's spin the quantum wheel in order to find out what I'll be reading next in the month of June. Welcome to the quantum wheel, where all of the patron picks are both simultaneously picked and not picked until we observe a winner. Or at least that's what Big Brother tells me. Let's find out what I'll be reading in the month of June. Spin, quantum wheel spin. Hopefully something fun. I think a little light, a little sci-fi adventure perhaps. Looks like it could be Sinners or Diamond Age. I think it's going to be Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. Okay, I'm excited to read this. I've only read one Stephenson book, and that was Snow Crash, which I found to be quite a lot of fun, although I think that is a little bit more light and satirical than some of his other books. But Diamond Age, looking forward to diving into some more kind of cyberpunk-esque work from Neil Stephenson, so that sounds good to you? Join me in the month of June. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash or just gently click the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, like Nima, a New Eden, Half-Ogre, Zakawe, Samil, and the Dictator Colin. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.